to episode number 6 of the Health One podcast. Today I'm going to be talking about my mental health journey, a little bit of a vulnerable episode. I would have touched on it, I suppose, a little bit of a sprinkling of mental health in the other podcast because it is linked to your physical health, it is linked to your hormonal health, it was linked to my body image, my eating disorders, etc, etc. So that's where this episode is going to hopefully connect the dots. There may be some overlap, but I suppose I want to talk about the vulnerable side of things, and I want to speak a little bit about the practicality of it and help people understand, I suppose, anyone who is going through a tough time at the minute. I can only speak from my own experience based on suffering with anxiety and depression. I suppose there are other mental health illnesses such as bipolar disease, schizophrenia, and so on. I'm not going to talk about those today because obviously I don't have experience with those, so I'm just going to share my story. So like I said, I have touched on it briefly. I've mentioned that I suppose when I was suffering with mental health issues, I wasn't really aware that I wasn't aware of what the physical sensations in my body were. I wasn't aware of my thoughts. I wasn't aware of how I was in control of my thoughts. I wasn't aware of how I was suppressing emotions. There were so many behaviors or habits that I was doing that I wasn't aware that was having enough impact on my mental health. What I would have done was, like, I suppose, until the point of awareness was reached, when I actually finally admitted that I had anxiety, or I suppose realized that I had depression. From that point on, I would have tried to look for supplements, look for things that would fix me instead of actually going to therapy and actually really facing my inner demons and really being open and honest with what was going on in my head. So I'm going to explain my journey with therapy throughout the years. I am deciding to not touch too much on trauma in this episode. I'm not going to really talk about that in detail. I'm not going to talk about the nervous system too much because I do think that is an episode for another day where I will absolutely geek out because I love it, and I think it's really important that we are all aware of how trauma can affect us, how our nervous system controls everything, how our past, our childhood, even if you don't think that you have trauma, you could potentially have trauma because it's based on your perception. So that's what's really important, that we all need to be aware of how we can be rerunning these scripts of things that have happened to us in the past and projecting them onto our current situation or into the future and so on. So I would have had anxiety for a number of years. I would have spoke about how your gut health and your mental health are connected because of that gut-brain connection. So when I had physical sensations in my body, I was only ever focusing on the gut aspect of it. I would have had this feeling, I literally had no words to describe what that sensation was. So I would have had chest pain, I would have had regular anxiety attacks, I would have been in a chronic state of anxiety. I would have had obviously gut issues because of that gut-brain connection. I would have suffered with getting dizzy quite a lot, getting overwhelmed quite a lot. Like I mentioned, with my speech would have gone quite a lot, that I wouldn't be able to hold a conversation. I would either stumble my words or completely freeze and shut down. So this was something that I suffered with on a regular basis, and nobody had a fucking clue. It literally wasn't until, I think it was that year 2017, that I actually realised that I had anxiety. And I'm going to share a few books as well that really helped me on my anxiety journey with, I suppose, throughout the years. So first one is Lost Connections. Second one is The Power of Now. Third one is A New Earth. And there's another one by Brotheridge. I'm not sure what the book is called, but that did help me at a point in time about moving through my anxiety. So I would have started the self-development journey at that stage, and I would have been able to actually listen to podcasts and try to come up with ways to help myself, because again, like I said, it was always me trying to help myself move through this or find the answer. And it was probably because I didn't want to tell anyone else what was going on internally. I was self-stigmatizing to fuck. Like, if you could find the definition of self-stigmatizing in the dictionary, you would see my picture beside it. I felt that if I had mental health issues and people knew about it, that I was weak. I was afraid people, how they would think about me. I was afraid that they'd look down on me. I was just afraid that they'd think differently of me. And that is a thing that we all can experience because there's a lot of shame around mental health, and there still is a lot of stigma. And I've spoken about how we have come on leaps and bounds with the conversations about mental health, but the stigma is still very much there. And I can only speak from Ireland. I do think it's really bad in Ireland. For the younger generations, it is progressing in a massive way. Like, it's really, really amazing. What's great to see is that there is that awareness in schools now, that they're actually bringing this from the ground up so that we do have that openness and we have that awareness, because literally you can have, again, this is a thing that I used to think about. It's like, I have nothing wrong with me. How could I possibly have mental health issues? I have nothing to be upset over in my life. How could I possibly have mental health issues? So it's this self-stigmatizing, self-shame, this guilt that you're like, you do not deserve, or you do not classify as someone with mental health issues because you have XYZ. When you can have mental health issues regardless of your current situation, okay? Like, you'll literally see, like, Robin Williams, he had depression, he was suicidal, and obviously took his own life very tragically. He could be someone you look on the outside looking in and you'd see he is a comedian, he's rich, he's famous, he's living the fucking dream. And then look what the unfortunate result was. So we need to understand that you do not need to meet a criteria to basically classify as mental health in terms of circumstantial. Obviously, there is physical symptoms, mental symptoms, how it affects your day-to-day life in terms of a medical diagnosis of criteria that you meet. But you really need to look at how you're perceiving mental health and understanding that people can suffer with poor mental health on a daily basis for a period of time or for their whole life, and there might not be anything inherently wrong with their life, okay? So this is where we need to understand that it can come from a physiological place, it can come from trauma, it can come from your hormones, it can come from inflammation, it can come from a lack of sunlight, it can come from dealing with stress and work, it can come from financial worries, it can come from dealing with emotionally unavailable parents, emotionally unavailable partners, it can come from having no purpose in life, feeling hopeless, feeling lost. It can come from putting pressure on yourself for feeling like you're not where you're meant to be in life, or you don't know where you're going in life. And this is how multifactorial mental health is. And I want to explain about the mental health continuum or spectrum, okay? So similar to what I mentioned about eating disorders, where you can have healthy relationship with food on one end, eating disorders on the other, you've got disordered eating in the middle, you've got obviously extreme ends of the spectrum, but then you can oscillate in the middle, okay? So with mental health, you can have good mental health on one side, poor mental health on the other side, and somewhere in the middle we can have the day-to-day struggles. We can have monthly worries, we can have a quarterly stressful period in work, we can have a death, a grievance, and so on. We can oscillate between the two back and forth, and this is what's really important to understand. Obviously there are those that are diagnosed with mental health disorders, but I want to start a conversation today to help people understand that just because you are diagnosed with a mental health disorder does not mean that's your final destination. It is not a permanent diagnosis, and it doesn't need to be. There's a myth with mental health disorders that it's just down to a chemical imbalance in the body, and that's not what it's all about, okay? That is an outcome as a result of how your life is, as a result of how your inner world is, as a result of trauma you have experienced, as a result of purpose in your life, as a result of your current circumstances, financial, emotional, relationship circumstances, etc. And that can lead us to a very, very, very poor place. And I really strongly believe that we can develop tools, we can work on self-development, we can get supports with services that can get us to a place where we're back on the opposite end of the mental health continuum. But again, we can have low days every so often, we can have periods of time. And I'm sharing this as someone who has been through it, and someone who actually thought that there was no possible way that I could ever feel happiness or pure joy or gratitude the way that I have experienced in my life. I've actually had a low day yesterday and the day before, and what can happen is sometimes I get a little bit freaked out that I'm like, oh my god, why am I feeling low? What's going on in my life? What do I need to assess? What do I need to fix? What do I need to do? But what's important to understand is that we do have these low days every so often, and it doesn't mean there's anything inherently wrong with you. It just means that we are human beings. We experience all the full spectrum of emotions. We can have shit hitting the fan in life sometimes. Things don't really go our way. We can have emotional periods of time, and that's okay. And what's important is that we learn to honour our emotions, honour where we are currently in our circumstances, and really give ourselves that space and time to process it and move through it, okay? So I would have had both anxiety and depression, okay? Every time I say anxiety now, I can hear my friend Saz, because she always slangs me and says anxiety. So she's going to be listening to this. But anyways, I would have had both anxiety and depression, okay? Double whammy, get a girl who can do both. Very fucking enjoyable experience. Obviously sarcasm. So anxiety would have been first for me. that I can remember. I can remember being younger as well and having bouts of feeling really low and depressed. And again, because it's a distant memory, it's difficult for me to like pinpoint whether that was actual depression or again it was just a low day or a low period of time or where things weren't going my way in life and we just experienced emotions and we're feeling that little bit down. But I can remember memories from when I was younger. And again, when I said about like that, those memories of anxiety, where I would have had those urges and impulses and like intrusive thoughts would have been something I suffered with when I was younger quite a lot. Would have had intrusive thoughts about like danger, safety, really about like how my thoughts could affect other people. So like when I mentioned with touching wood, when something bad popped into my head, catastrophizing, over analysing situations, really what I would have done quite a lot is trying to predict what was going to happen, the outcome of a situation, trying to plan the future. And that's what can happen with anxiety, is that you can be living in the future quite a lot, okay? With depression, they say that you can be living in the past quite a lot. You can be, I suppose, rejecting your current situation and wishing things were the way that they were beforehand, or longing for something in the future as well. It's not obviously tied, one's tied to the future, one's tied to the past, but that's what can happen. You can kind of be stuck anywhere but the present moment. So presence is something that really, really helped me through meditation, and I'm going to talk about that just a little bit later on. So with anxiety, like I said, I didn't have the language to describe those physical sensations in my body. And it came to a head when I was in that period of time where I was working in the hospital and I was working overtime hours. I was also trying to socialise. I was trying to do the gym at 6 a.m. or 10 o'clock at night. I was trying to just do everything with college and just be a people pleaser and be a version of myself that everybody loved and be switched on all the time, like just identifying with being an overachiever, perfectionist, everything. But again, I was still highly, highly, highly unaware of everything that was running through my brain, that script that was on overdrive, okay? It was just me on autopilot. So when I was working in the hospital, I started to develop chest pain. And what was great was I could talk to the doctors, my pals, and I was like, hey, I'm having some chest pain. Like, do you have any idea what's going on? So I did get investigated because what actually happened was my brother had like had pleurisy around his heart, so it was like an inflammation of fluid around the heart. And I remember like people like hearing really sad situations of when my other brother was playing football, and kids dropping dead with heart attacks and stuff like that around the time. There was a few incidents, and obviously that goes straight to my fucking head and overthinking begins. So I obviously wanted to get it investigated and get it ruled out. So I got an echocardiograph, I got some blood tests done, and I got a chest x-ray. And what happened was the tests were inconclusive, so it came back, everything was normal, everything was all clear. And I just could not wrap my head around that. There was something wrong with me. It started off with this niggling bit of chest pain, okay, like a very, very slight chest pain that I would experience like once every blue moon. And it started to get progressively worse and worse till it was constant. And what actually happened was the more that it happened, the more I thought about it, the worse it got. So this is, again, the mind-body connection and how important it is. So your physical health and your mental health are really, really fucking connected. So anyways, I would have got that ruled out. And a lot of people would have said to me at the time, maybe it's stress. No fucking way am I stressed. I am thriving. Don't even try and tell me that I need to do less. I need to do everything. That was my life. My life was like, nope, I need to gym, I need to socialise, and obviously need to do college, and I need money, and I need to work, and I enjoyed work, and I enjoyed anything that kept me going because I hated being alone. I hated stopping. I hated being still. I hated anything that forced me to be with my own thoughts, to be what I felt like was loneliness. Well, it was loneliness. So I suppose being alone and being lonely are two very different things. You can be alone, so on your own, but doesn't mean you have to feel lonely. But if you feel lonely, that means that something's missing from your life. But what I also found was like I was surrounded by people and I still felt lonely. So you can be surrounded by the wrong people, or you could be surrounded by the right people, but because of what your lifestyle is like physically or your internal script or whatever is going on, you could still feel lonely because you lack the ability to connect with other people on a deeper level. So there's so many layers to mental health, and I suppose that's really the benefits of therapy, and I'll share my experience with therapy in a minute. But I would have realised at that moment in time that once I got those tests done, that the chest pain did die down. It did subside. And I was like, whoa, man, what's this all about? What just happened there that it's suddenly gone? What's the link? And it was then, like, I'm very in tune with my body. I'm very introspective. I'm probably just a bit of a geek over that stuff. I'm just really nerd out, and I really want to understand what's connected to this and why that, this, that, and the other. And I suppose that's why I'm really good at what I'm doing. Then if you fast forward a little bit of time, still wasn't fully aware of what was going on with myself. I would have had my first panic attack. That was fun. Again, not realising what the fuck was going on with my body. I came home from my trip from Thailand after doing a summer of working overtime in work. I did a holiday in Croatia. I did a trip to Thailand. I was trying to gym in between and socialise in between and save money, then spend money. Sleep deprived, my gut was fucked, my hormones are fucked, my head was fucked, everything was fucked. So I came home with 10 days to my repeat exam, and I realised there was no one in my house at that time. I had no money left, so I also started to read through the subject and read through how much I had to get done in the next 10 days. Then I started to think about the fact that I was failing. I had already failed first year, so I didn't want to fail again. And everything just came on top of me all at once. So I had a panic attack. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what the fuck a panic attack was, never even heard of it. And I suddenly couldn't breathe. I was hyperventilating. I'm sure a lot of people know what a panic attack is right now, but very much thought I was dying, and I could not understand what was going on with me, because like I said, back then we didn't even know what a panic attack was, and I could never ever understand those symptoms and associate them with myself, because like I said, I associate mental health with weakness. I just had stereotypes with mental health, especially anxiety. I would have been like, no, it's that socially awkward person that can't be extroverted, that can't be out there, that can't be talking to people, that can't be thriving in work. And that's not me. So that was my very, very fucked up stereotype of a mental health disorder. So that's why it took me so long to admit that I had mental health issues, to admit that I needed help, to actually ask for help and go through with it. So I eventually did realise, okay, between the heart tests, between the panic attack, between the chronic anxiety, chronic sensations of fear, impending doom, like literally time was my biggest fear. So with your nervous system, it is fight or flight, okay? So it's you running away from danger in order to protect yourself. So think about like a tiger or a bear, something that's an imminent threat or danger. Years ago, we would have had to run away from that, or we would have been thinking about starvation, the famine, a fire, etc. Nowadays, we actually have a lot more safety, but it is based on our perception. So that's what's great, because we can actually work on our perception. Obviously, there is a lot of horrible things still going on in the world. I'm not disregarding that at all. But for a lot of people, it is based on our perception, and that puts us in a really strong position for us to help ourselves move through mental health issues. But back to the fight or flight. My fight or flight was like how people perceived me, time, money, feeling like my body wasn't enough. All of these things were my danger, that I was always running from something, that I was always needing to keep going and going and going and going. And that's why stopping and standing still for me and slowing down was like an absolute no-no. It had actual fear, trembling fear in my body if you had told me to stop. So if anyone ever told me to stop stressing, to relax, to pull back on things, absolutely no fucking way. And like I would lash out about it. Like it wasn't like I was just like ignoring them. It was like literally like I was so protective over the fact that this is something that I needed to do. I was so consumed by it. I didn't see a way out. But I realised that I did actually need to go to counselling. And when I was in college in DCU, someone actually mentioned to me that you can get free counselling through the college system. So I was like, okay, I think I emailed about it first. Then they said to come on into the office to fill out some forms. It took me 3 attempts to go into that office because of the self-stigma, the self-shame, and just to even vocalise the words that I need help, that I need support, because I still couldn't admit it to myself. So I eventually went. I eventually started counselling, and even then I was like, this chap has no idea what I'm dealing with. He cannot relate to me. This is like a 40-year-old man. He's no idea what my world is like. He's no idea of my struggles. And he did help me to a certain point. He helped me regulate my breathing a little bit. He probably could have done a better job of helping me understand why I need to regulate my breathing, and I suppose maybe I would have started meditation a bit sooner, but he did a good job. And he helped me understand a little bit about like financial situations, family situations, social situations, my physical health situations. But I actually only did a certain amount of sessions, and I decided that I was done. So this is the thing, is that like I needed help, but it was like I didn't want help. I didn't want to let people in. I didn't want people to know what was going on in my inner world, because I was so embarrassed. I was just so full of guilt and so full of shame. So when you suppress your emotions, when you isolate yourself further from people, that's what can develop into depression. Okay, so obviously there's more contributing factors into depression, but that's how mine, I suppose, moved from anxiety to depression. I would have had a few depressive episodes, but I would have had 2 points in the following year, where things came to a head when I was actually like, holy fuck. So I went to my GP, and I broke down in the GP's office, and I said that I am really not myself. I'm really not feeling good. I don't feel like me. I feel really low. And then she was obviously, I wanted obviously a medical explanation for it. I wanted a reason for something going on with my body physically, nothing to do with what was going on in my head. Now, my physical health had something to do with it. It did feed into it, but I didn't want to even face that inner world. She referred me on to get more counselling, and I don't think I went through with it. I think I started my placement, my college placement in a new job, and my life kind of changed a little bit, and I just put it off. It was summertime. I just suppressed it like I always did, and obviously it didn't get any better. So again, at the time, I had kind of started to understand the anxiety and how it was affecting my body, but the depression was new to me. And what always terrified me the most was the unknown. It was like how I couldn't control what was going on in my body, how I couldn't actually help myself move through it, how I couldn't understand it, or like I said, the language to use to verbalize how I was actually feeling. I do remember opening up to some people in my life and essentially being rejected, essentially being told to stop stressing, stop worrying, cheer up, don't really have anything to worry about, and so on. And just for anyone listening, like if anyone opens up to you with mental health issues, you don't have to know what to say to them. You just have to validate what they say. You have to believe them. Whether you have this image in your head that it's, let me think of some stigma things, like attention or anything that you think about that person, you have to validate them, okay? Whether they're being honest or not is not up for you to decide, because that could very well be the deciding factor of where they continue to get better, or they shut you out as a person that they thought they once trusted, and they isolate themselves further. So I just want to stress how important that point is. I remember at a point in time thinking, like, there was a girl that unfortunately took her own life from suicide that year, and I remember literally thinking, like, is that going to happen to me? Like, that's where my mind went. I never had suicidal thoughts, but I genuinely was like, is that what this is going to lead to? Is that what depression is for everyone? I didn't understand anything about suicidal thoughts or how anyone could take their own life. And again, or died by suicide, I think is the correct term that you use now. But even I remember the comments that people would have made. I remember telling people about that unfortunate girl, and people were like, God, that's a very selfish thing to do. Like, you have no, like, I suppose I'm not going to rant here, but just for anyone who ever does think that, the person who is suicidal does not think that that is a selfish thing that they're doing. They think it's a selfless thing that they're doing. So I've obviously done mental health first aid training and suicide awareness training since then. I pretty much threw myself into mental health work for a good few years because, one, I wanted to understand it more for myself. Two, I wanted to help other people coming from a really, really deep place of connection, I suppose, of understanding, of trauma bonding. No, I'm only joking. But basically just wanted to help people, and it was like that I was finding worth in wanting to fix people as well. So that's another topic for another day. But I do remember doing that suicide awareness training and understanding that it really isn't about anyone outside of that. That person thinks that by taking their own life that they're doing everyone else a favour. They think that they have no other choice because they are hopeless. I remember at a point in time listening to podcasts and trying to help myself through it. And there was an episode that it was, the opposite of depression isn't happiness, the opposite of depression is vitality. And when you look up the meaning of vitality, it means full of life. And when I heard that podcast, I fucking bawled my eyes out crying. Like, I'm actually a bit emotional thinking about it, because it's actually just such a very different version of myself. Like, I can't, like, that poor younger version of myself, I just would love to give her a big hug and show her, like, how, I can't actually get emotional, and show her how amazing life is now, and show her how brave she has been, and show her how things can get better, that your current circumstances is not your final destination, that your world is going to change and is going to get better, and you just need to keep hope. I was hopeless. I felt numb. I had no emotions. I felt disconnected from people. I felt I was just running on autopilot. I felt like a bit of a zombie. I was sleep deprived. I had insomnia. I had, again, my health issues were really, really bad. But I remember there was an actual period of time where I used to just cry. Like, cry quite a lot. And again, nobody really knew. So again, that kind of period of time with my mental health, the anxiety and depression, would have kind of came to an end in 2018. And it was like I got to this place where I thought I was healed. I thought I was fixed. I thought I had completed it. I had overcome anxiety and depression. And that's the way I used to speak as well. I now understand that I'm not that I am not immune to mental health issues, because like I mentioned about that spectrum, you can of course experience things in your life, an accumulation of things in your life that can lead you to a place of suffering with your mental health again. I did experience that again. 2019, I was in a very stressful situation with work. I was in a very fucked up toxic relationship, topic for another day. And I absolutely would have had, because of that relationship, I would have developed low self-worth again. I would have really started that people pleasing again, that validation again. I would have really been striving for that overachievement with work, whereas in 2017, I was just all about me. I was all about self-love. I was all about not needing to have a shiny job, a shiny car, a shiny money to go on all these holidays, said no to occasions, really looked at meditation, really looked at looking after me and being honest with myself. And just, did I journal then? I don't think I journaled then, but I moved to intuitive eating. I really just went after being my more authentic self. And anyone who didn't fit into that world, fine, that's good. We're just not meant to be friends. We're just not meant to be in the same social situation, and so on. I suppose what has happened over the years is that I have gone through the depths of my mental health and my nervous system with trauma. So I suppose years ago it would have been circumstantial. That would have been why my nervous system was the way it was, why I had anxiety, why I had depression, my lifestyle. Really would have learned the tools to help me cope better, really would have moved through my eating disorders, really got into myself to a really, really, really good place. I would have still had underlying anxiety every so often. And like I said, anxiety is a feeling that you can still experience. It doesn't mean you have an anxiety disorder. You can have low days. It doesn't mean you have depression. But I suppose further than through the last 3 years, if I can count, from 2018, I would have done counselling after that relationship. I would have had to work through that quite a good bit. I would have had a memory, and I would have had PTSD for a while, resurface from when I was younger. I would have done some trauma therapy for that as well. And I suppose the most transformational work that I have done has been self-development work, spiritual work that combines both psychology, neuroscience, spirituality, energetic work, somatic work, everything combined, and preventative measures as well. So looking at my sleep, looking at my nutrition, looking at my self-talk, looking at my relationships, looking at how I'm living my life. So just one prime example of that is I can experience seasonal depression because of the sunlight. So a lot of people can be susceptible to that, especially in Ireland. So top tip, take your vitamin D supplement from the months of, say, October to March time if you're not in the sun. I just know that I'm going to be a winter dodger for the rest of my life because that's going to keep my mental health in check. And obviously I am privileged and fortunate enough to do that, but I also work really fucking hard to make sure that happens. So I've done therapy more recently as well, back in February 2022 the year is, and I found that beneficial as well. But what I will say is that I used to think that therapy is just one thing that you do once, but we can go through different situations in life, different relationships, different careers, have memories resurface. We can explore our projections, we can explore our emotions, our characteristics, our traits, of things from the past and how that plays out today. And that they can be opportunities for us to work through that and get therapy again, or do journaling, or do meditation, or do some other sort of alternative therapy. So it doesn't just stop at one destination. It's a journey that you constantly need to be working on to support yourself. Similar to your physical health, you exercise regularly, hopefully. You not an excessive amount either. You eat your food, you drink your water, you take supplements if you need to, you get some sunlight, you get some nature, you connect with people who support you authentically. That keeps you physically well. So to keep yourself mentally well, you need to be looking after your internal world as well. And I can't stress it enough. And when you look after your internal world, your external world will shift, okay? We attach our happiness to outcomes. We attach our happiness to other people changing for us, to circumstances changing for us. But we need to be the ones to initiate that. We need to be the ones to take the lead. We need to be the ones that actually make those changes for us. And it can be fucking scary. It can require courage. It can require deep, emotional, fucking re-traumatizing work sometimes. But what the outcome is even if just momentarily, you will feel better, but you will begin to get better and better, and you will finally actually start to feel happiness, start to feel bliss, start to feel peace, start to feel gratitude, start to feel abundance, start to feel fucking free of the weights of the shit that goes on in your head, free of the weights of the stressors, free of the weights of other people's opinions, and so on. I think as well, when you start to explore your own inner world, you stop to take things personally. You realise that a lot of people are actually projecting their own shit, their own insecurities, their own limiting beliefs, their own issues from the past. And then you can start to see that human in front of you as someone that may need some support, as someone that may need you to connect with them, remove your ego from the situation and help them move through the issue without attacking each other's character, and actually just trying to help each other to move through the issue together. This is where I think it's so vital that you follow Instagram accounts or read articles or listen to podcasts or whatever it is that expand your mind, like expand your language, expand your world, okay? It's so fucking important. I think traveling has really helped me understand the importance of that, but I would have been doing this for years anyway, listening to podcasts, reading books, etc., etc. But I do think that in Ireland, we can have a very closed-minded mindset, okay? We can have a very fixed mindset rather than one that is open and one that is actually tries to see beyond the four walls of our house or the neighbourhood circumference or whatever the fuck. I don't know what I'm trying to say. But we actually can see that we are all individuals struggling with our own shit, but we can actually be open and connect with one another rather than feeling like we're all against each other. Like, just to give you an example, as I was coming in here today, driving in my bike, parking, and the Balinese workers here, they're all so smiley and so happy, and they always say hi, they always say thank you, and I say please, and they're just so full of energy, okay? They're always so full of life, they're always just wanting to connect with other people. In Ireland, you walk down the street, literally people would be like, if you're smiling at someone, like, look at that fucking weirdo over there smiling to herself. Like, it's a bit of a fucked up world we live in, and I don't think it's limited to Ireland. I think it is the Western world, but I do think that we have a responsibility to start with ourselves and to offer someone a smile, to not take things personally, to not assume the worst in people, to maybe give people the benefit of the doubt. I suppose the last thing I do want to touch on is the physical aspect of it as well. So my over-exercising, my sleep deprivation, so I had full-on insomnia because I've had chronic anxiety. My mind was in overdrive all the time. I felt like I was waiting for my alarm to go off in the morning because I thought I was going to be late for something, or the stressors from the day, or replaying situations in my head, or trying to predict the future, or think of things that were going to happen before they happened, worrying about things, etc., etc. That led to me having insomnia. Couple that with not having my period from amenorrhea, from low energy availability. Like today I found a picture from 5 years ago, which was literally salmon and vegetables cooked 2 different ways, so that it made me feel like I had a full plate of something. It was literally broccoli was one of them, and like a mixture of peppers and courgettes, and like a low calorie barbecue sauce, so a 0 calorie barbecue sauce. Like, I don't even know how much calories that meal was, maybe 200, and like that's what I ate like 3 times a day. Like, such low energy. Like, we deserve to eat. And just to give you a bit of information, your mind, your energy source for your brain, the preferred nutrient source is glucose, which comes from carbohydrates. Okay, eat your goddamn carbs. It's really important that we do look at everything from a holistic standpoint, and I'll probably go into the other aspects of what can contribute to mental health at another time, like your money mindset with your financial health, your spiritual health. I'll be talking about spirituality in the next one. Your emotions, your relationships, your mindset, your limiting beliefs, and so on. The inflammation with my gut health, with my IBS, wasn't great, obviously, as well. And all of these things have a contributing factor to how I feel in my body, and then the mindset or the thought element of it can perpetuate that and make the situation worse. So yeah, that is my journey today. That is my experience with mental health to date. I have had other situations with mental health, with trauma more recently, like I said, with resurfacing a memory and PTSD and working through that, but that is a topic for another day. Let's just call it there. So yeah, I hope if you benefit from this conversation that you can leave some feedback in the review section. Subscribe, obviously, if you want to listen for more. And please do share this podcast to anyone that you think might benefit from listening to this conversation, whether it is someone that is going through it themselves, or whether it is you that's going through something at the minute and you want them to understand what your world is like at the minute, just that little bit more. You can find me as always at The Health Hun on Instagram and www.thehealthhun.com. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.